Hello, Steamies. I am back once again reviewing another fan-made Thomas YouTube channel. Let's get into it. So the channel that I'm reviewing today is a channel called Terence the Tractor 525. All one word, because I want you to go and find it and subscribe. I'm specifically reviewing the playlist called the Sodor Series, an 11-episode fan-made series using live-action Bachman, Hornby, and other Thomas-related model layouts. This is a series that's had a lot of love, dedication, and commitment by those who have made it, as the full series has taken 6 years to complete. The first episode starting in 2016, and the final episode premiering last year. All of the episodes have been written and directed by Da Doctor. There's been a lot of other YouTubers that have been involved in this production, so many that I don't think I would have enough time to give them all a shout out. Go and subscribe to the channel, watch the series, and you'll find who they are. I'll read you the disclaimer for the episodes of the Sodor series. This video is safe for children to view, but the intended audience is adults and older fans of the original Thomas the Tank Engine series. These videos are a love letter to the craft and techniques of a bygone era, and are meant to be seen by adults who will recognise the format and appreciate it in today's world. You can definitely tell that this was a love letter to the classic series of Thomas and Friends, because everything about it was just so well done. The layout is absolutely fantastic, and I found the story really engaging, specifically because it was one continued storyline throughout the whole series. There was some that didn't link here or there, but they would link into either previous events in the series or foreshadow events coming up in future episodes. So this is going to be a little bit of a different style of fan review. Last time I did the top 10 best episodes, but because these 11 all intertwine, I think it's only fair that I just run through them all, episode by episode, give my thoughts on it, as well as a brief description that I've given each episode and my ranking out of 10. These are all my own opinions, but I did really enjoy this series, and I hope that Terence the Tractor 525 makes another series, and if he ever needs any Scottish twins to do voiceover, let me know. Okay, enough of the jibber jabber. Let's dive in. Episode 1, Back to Shunting. Annie and Clarabelle have to go to the works, so Thomas has to go back to his old job of shunting coaches, giving Gordon, James and Henry a big ego. I really appreciate the attempt at a Scottish accent from the Doctor when it comes to Emily and later on Donald and Douglas, but it does sound more Indian, so if you need a Scotsman to do the voiceovers, I'm right here. That's the only thing that jarred me. Aside from that, I really like the story. It's a very strong pilot episode. It was a throwback to the Series 1 days where Gordon, James and Henry were the three stooges of the island, just bossing all the little engines about because they could. You feel sorry for Thomas because it feels like he's regressing back to season 1. There was a good runaway scene, and it was a nice twist that Thomas actually knew about the points failure and used it to his advantage to get a break away from shunting again. It's the difference between the Thomas of season 1 and the Thomas of this series. Season 1 Thomas really just grumbled and griped. This Thomas is a bit more intuitive, matured, and knows how to play the game. Solid start, 8 out of 10. Episode 2, Edward and the Lost Child. A young boy named Mitchell is left behind at a station. He climbs aboard Edward's cab and they go looking for his parents. I think this is the only episode that doesn't really have a tie-in to the overall narrative of the series, but I really like it. It's a nice slice of life episode. It's Edward in a starring role, and it's a nice kind of cat and mouse chase episode trying to get Mitchell back to his parents. And then you find out that his nanny is actually Mrs. Kindly. I like that. Good little Easter egg. People might think it's a simple story, but that's why I like it. It's not overly complicated. You get from A to B, and Edward in a starring role is always a win. 7 out of 10. Episode 3, Strain and Disdain. Henry thinks that nobody notices him because he's green, and his bad mood causes his passengers to have a rough coach ride. What I really like about this story is that it's relatable. Some of the best Audrey stories were ones that we could relate to as kids and adults, and this one can relate to both. We all have times where we feel underappreciated and undervalued, so you could empathise with how Henry was feeling. It was nice to see engines like Salty, Murdoch and Oliver pop up in this episode, and I know that I'd said that the Doctor's Scottish accent wasn't good, but I really like his James accent. I like how he voices James. I think that's one that he's really hit the nail on the head. And it ends nicely because Henry finally gets that rest that he really needs. Again, 7 out of 10. Episode 4, Pride of the Express. Gordon likes to boast about how strong he is pulling the Express, so Bill and Ben decide to play a little trick on him. It was always something that I thought was a really good dynamic, Gordon, Bill and Ben. Touched on it in season 2 and season 3 of the classic series, so I'm glad they've kind of expanded on it in this one. I do like the fact Bill and Ben tried to get one up on Gordon, but this time it didn't happen. Because Bill and Ben attach trucks to the back of Gordon's train, but he doesn't realise it, when he comes to Gordon's Hill, he's so determined not to get stuck again that he does get over it, coaches and trucks included. And when he finds this out, his ego shoots through the roof. That is a very Gordon trait. I like the storytelling of this episode. I do like how it started planting the seeds of, once again, a divide between the big engines and the little engines. And there were some good flashback scenes. Very creative. 8 out of 10. Episode 5, The Express Trio. With their newfound alliance in place, Gordon, James and Henry start experiencing unexplained accidents. Watch this episode specifically for one scene, the James and Terrence the tractor scene. It's hilarious. I actually laughed out loud the first time I watched it. At this point you start to see the sets and his style of model making really progressing. Don't get me wrong, the originals were great, but it's always good to see that bit of development and that little bit of extra care that they take when trying to create more episodes. The story itself was intriguing, it had some good foreshadowing for going forward, and just at some points I didn't feel as connected to the story with this one. So I would say it was 6 out of 10. Episode 6, Determined Termination. Diesel is up to his old tricks again, but the engines think that it's Percy causing all these accidents. Can Percy clear his good name? Yes, he clears his name. We find out that it's Diesel that's been causing all these problems because he wants to make a dent in the reputation of steam engines, which in turn will start the dieselization push on Sodor. It's a really strong story, it's quite intense, and the fact that the divide was already starting to form in the couple episodes prior makes you understand why the engines would think it was Percy that was actually doing this. And of course, the trucks decide to pay Diesel out again, leading to his downfall, and then also leading to a rather nasty accident for the Fat Controller. I like how Diesel's portrayed in this. He's manipulative, scheming, cunning, but also really aggressive and violent. I think that's the way that Diesel should have been portrayed. Again, the ending was quite shocking. It led to the big engines and the tank engines coming back together again, and we saw Diesel get kicked off the island for good. 9 out of 10. Episode 7, The Daredevils. Some schoolboys start playing chicken by running on to the tracks when engines are coming across the main line. This starts to cause confusion and delay. It's a good Toby-centred episode. He essentially becomes the Inspector Cluedo of the island of Sodor, trying to figure out what's going on with all these kids running on to the railway tracks. There's a very, very brief hint of this, where Toby is talking to Donald and Douglas, and it's something that we've never really seen in the Railway series, or in the classic series. I think that could have been a good pairing, the Scottish twins and the old steam tram. And this episode shows that there was potential there. The story's not as simple as Edward and the Lost Child, but it does have that slower pace, which is a good thing. After the intensity of the last 2 episodes, we really need something that was a little bit slower to kind of break it up. And I really enjoyed this episode. So I would say 7 out of 10. Episode 8, The Waddling Kipper. While Henry is resting, Duck is tasked with taking the Flying Kipper, but it leads to disastrous results. And now we get some of the backstory to what's been going on while all this has been happening with Diesel's maniacal scheme. Diesel finally gets his revenge on Duck, sneaking up behind Duck when he's going up the hill pulling the Flying Kipper to make Duck feel like it's so easy going up the hill, and then he just stops and let Duck fly down the bottom of the hill and cause a massive crash. If there's one way to get your own back, that's certainly it. I do like that Murdoch had a prominent role in this episode. I think Duck and Murdoch are a good pairing. And we get a bit of backstory to the Express Trio plot when Diesel enlists the spiteful brake van as part of his scheme. So I would say this is an 8 out of 10. Which leads us to episode 9, Old Spiteful. The spiteful brake van is back, and he's out for revenge. I'm glad to see that the Fat Controller's finally out of the hospital after his leg break in the 6th episode. And it's a nice twist introducing Paxton in this, a CGI series character that really could have fit in with a classic era style. think that he's essentially trying to be the Boko of this series, proving that not all Diesels are evil. Having Donald and the spiteful brake van paired up again is a nice callback to Series 2. And yes, this is the spiteful brake van from Series 2 after he's been rebuilt. Does that count as a resurrection? I like the runaway train sequence. I like the incidental music for it. I did jump when the spiteful brake van all of a sudden screamed quite loudly. The crash is good. And when the Fat Controller finally loses, that's something that I really wanted to see in the TV series more. You can't always be happy-go-lucky and understanding. Sometimes pressure does get to you. And then you get the setup at the end where Ari and Bert are going to take over Diesel's task to try and finish what he started. 9 out of 10. Episode 10, Trouble in the Center. Ari and Bert pick up where Diesel left off by turning all the engines into middle engines. It's a great opening sequence to this episode, and I do like that we see James as the middle engine in the opening. It's a good Series 6 Easter egg. Well, Ari and Bert's plan is quite simple, making all the engines into middle engines, just causing chaos until they get what they want. And it's pretty effective. And because Donald and Douglas are the central pairing of this story, it wins for me. There's a good chase sequence when Douglas is trying to catch Ari and Bert so that they can get them busted by the Fat Controller. And of course, Bill and Ben inadvertently cause a crash that takes Douglas out of commission. What I liked about this one was the downbeat ending. It looks like Ari and Bert are actually going to see them what their plan is. Douglas is gone. Donald is sad that his brother's injured. And it ties in nicely that it's Oliver that's going to try and sort this out because he feels like he owes Douglas one from saving him from scrap. I personally think this was the best episode of the series, so I'm going to go 10 out of 10 for this one. Episode 11, An Unlikely Allegiance. With Douglas out of commission, Oliver turns to an old enemy to try and save the day. One of the things I liked about this series is that there was a lot of David Mitten-esque panning shots similar to the ones that he used in Season 2. I also liked the use of the incidental music when Bill and Ben first found Boko from Series 2, to Oliver wading his way through a den of trucks to find Scruffy. Rebuilt, but very, very bitter, understandably so, from his last encounter. But this Scruffy seems a bit different from the one that we had in the classic era. And I mean that in a good way. He has been slightly humbled by his experience, but it's also made him more methodical, more cunning, more willing to betray and side with anybody that just essentially pisses him off. So he's going to side with Oliver so they can get their form of chaos back, rather than the Diesel's form of chaos. It's the longest episode of the series, but it's because it's got things like the flashback sequence of Diesel converting Ari and Bert round to his plan. It's almost like he's using a form of brainwashing on them, with Ari and Bert essentially becoming the splodge of this Diesel. I like that the trucks put their brakes on so that they could try and help Oliver catch Ari and Bert, but of course, Ari runs away and leaves his brother for dead. Again, I'm glad that Scruffy betrayed Oliver, but I'm also glad that Oliver had a feeling that it was going to happen. He didn't seem that stupid this time. It's a good chase sequence. I found it particularly funny when Ari just rammed right through Elizabeth. But of all the engines to catch him, why James? I know they had the previous with the middle engine stuff, but I just don't get why it was James that caught him. I would have really liked it if, by a turn of event, it was actually Douglas that caught him. That he'd maybe got out of the works a bit sooner than he realised, and it's him that rounds the corner and is like, right, I've caught you. Revenge is a dish best served steaming. There was one thing that I really didn't like about this episode though. The fourth wall break at the end, with the guard that's kind of meant to be like the Korg from Thor Ragnarok, and just using it as a way to kind of bash the creators and Mattel and things like that. I get what they were trying to do, but Thomas isn't meta. It's not like a Deadpool breaking the fourth wall. It's meant to be realistic. And it was doing so well because everything about it was realistic. I was really enjoying the story. I was getting sucked back into the world, and that was just like a monumental swerve. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have your digs at Mattel or anybody that's deciding to cause chaos in the fandom. But there is a time and a place for it, and in the middle of a story where your audience is invested in it, I don't think that was the best call. It was a brilliant series, but that, at the tail end of the episode, cut that out, it's a solid 9 out of 10. You get that in, takes it down to a 6. So that's my review of the Sodor series from Terrence the Tractor 525. I highly recommend that you check it out. For anybody that's looking to try and be a content creator on YouTube, especially Thomas one, you learn a lot from this one. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, keep on chugging.